Hello, fans of History Hunters. I have a special surprise you probably didn't expect. But on Wednesday of this week, I was interviewed by Ralph Romeo. He's a DJ on radio station WPAT in New York City. He's a fan of History Hunters, and he wanted to talk to me on the air, spreading the message about History Hunters. He was kind enough to send me a copy of the audio, and this is how the interview went.
And a fantastic Wednesday evening right here in New York City. Ralph Romeo with you. Well, a special treat in store. Now, I search these people out. Hey, folks, because I find the best of the best. Now, this man right here, I was drawn to the YouTube channel. I guess it was maybe about 5 weeks ago. I cannot pull myself away from this channel called History Hunters. Now, this guy that you're going to hear for the next, I guess, maybe 25 minutes is 3,000 miles away, but the magic of radio, the magic of the internet, whatever the hell we're doing here, it brings him right to New York City. And we're about to hear from my friend Jeff Benziger. And Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for joining us. And, it's great to have you. I called Jeff out of the blue and said, I'm a fan of this channel, History Hunters. And, it took a minute for him to click why I'm listening to this thing in New York. But, what we have here, Jeff, is something that has so much power that you can touch people. And you said it to me the last conversation we had all over the world.
Absolutely. I'm kind of floored. When I started this program this channel about 6 years ago, I really did it with just my love of history and hoping that I could contribute something to the YouTube community because I had no prior experience with video production at all. So I started doing these videos thinking, it's never going to go anywhere. In fact, my mother, who actually died during the COVID thing, she would ask me all the time, why are you doing this? And I said, well, I don't know. Someday perhaps I'm going to, have a following, make money, and become somewhat known in the YouTube world. Because, there's millions of people on YouTube. So before she died, I took her to Graceland, and I did a video on Elvis Presley's mansion at Graceland. And then I went over to the Memphis Cemetery, and I highlighted some of the famous people who are buried there. And once I posted that video, my account just took off. I can't explain. It must have been the YouTube algorithm because it can make or break creators like me. And all of a sudden, my account started climbing, and the next thing you know, about a month or two ago, I hit 100,000 subscribers, which is always the milestone that YouTube creators want to hit. And that may be small potatoes compared to some people, but we're still growing. I'm growing about 3,000 subscribers every 28 days. So that's pretty good. I kind of chalk it up to the fact that I try to do subjects that nobody else has highlighted. Everybody wants to do videos on, for example, JFK's assassination. But I try to go places nobody else has gone and highlight people that nobody else has heard about. And I think that's part of my success. And also, I try to be as professional as I can be with my video production. And that requires hours and hours and hours of my free time.
Yeah.
I still have a day job. So
you're still hanging in there with a 9 to 5, even though you have something that's flourishing. It's a beautiful thing, Jeff. I saw the 100,000 that you passed recent for him. That's a milestone. That's a difficult thing to achieve, and you've done it. And you have an affinity toward. Some people say that the rate that you go visit these grave sites is very odd and very you don't see it very often because people see it as morbid. They see it as, I see it as history, as you do, I assume. But they see it as morbid. I see it as capturing history that rarely is captured because these people are long dead and gone, and we need to know more about them.
Right. And to make it clear, I don't exclusively visit cemeteries. I go to historical places. I've been to Virginia City, Nevada, highlighted the buildings there. I've gone to various places in Southern California, places that people have forgotten about. I'm just thrilled to be in places where history was made. Yeah, dead people are buried in cemeteries, but every person in that cemetery has a story, And every person in that cemetery is historic. You know, when I pass away, I don't want people to forget who I am. And I'm sure that they would like the same. Now, I've had people criticize me for example, when I go to Forest Lawn Memorial Park there in Glendale, where they call it the Disneyland of the Dead, literally, you probably can't hit all the famous people who are buried in there. And they think that's somewhat disrespectful. I don't think so. I would think if I were a celebrity and I've passed away, I'd want to be remembered, not forgotten. How about you?
No, I agree. I agree. And people see it as, you know, breaking someone's privacy, so on and so forth. I don't see it that way. I think if someone were adamant about the fact they did not want you to come, you wouldn't come. You would say, okay, we can go elsewhere. But to me, that's digging, pardon the pun, but that's digging up history. And that's something that we have to be able to do. And, you know, again, there's really a dearth of history learning these days. I mean, the young people, I sound like an old man, but I don't think they're aware of these things, why they're able to do what they can do, who started, who were the pioneers, who made this world, or this country, I should say, as it is today. I think we need a broader understanding of all these things.
You're absolutely right. And history is not being taught in this country anymore. And I think perhaps, I don't want to get too political, but I think it's by design. I think they want kids to forget about how we were founded, how our system of government was founded, why it was founded the way it was. And every town that you go to, you look at your buildings, you know, why was that building placed there? You know, history has all the answers to it. So I think that we need to learn history. We need to know, obviously, so we don't repeat mistakes of the past, and we can learn from them. We can learn their mistakes. We can learn, you know, what they did right.
And we're talking about historical figures that, you know, politics, of statesmanship, of the entertainment industry, which, you know, I'm an actor and I was drawn to that, although I'm a history freak myself, so I was drawn to the other aspect. But, you know, I remember one in particular that I saw in the beginning when I first started, I found you, was the Michael Landon Highway to Heaven / Little House on the Prairie. Visited that set. Just for example, just to start off, how was that experience?
Well, you know, I grew up with Little House on the Prairie and Bonanza, and Michael Landon was one of the guys I looked up to, and I actually got to meet him and follow him when he was filming Highway to Heaven in my area of Central California. I got to say that it's fascinating to watch that process take place, you know, the camera behind the camera, and I got to actually watch some scenes being shot. But a lot of people, you know, don't know where the series was shot. For example, there's one mountainous scene in, I believe it's a 2-hour episode called Jonathan's Mountain, a Little House on the Prairie. Yes. And, you know, Little House on the Prairie is supposed to be out in Kansas. Here they are in the High Sierra. And I saw this on TV when I was a kid, and I automatically knew where it was because I had been there before. Michael Landon loved to come to Central California, particularly in the Tuolumne County area, and shoot a lot of his movies, his TV shows.
Yeah, I think Ernie Borgnine was in that, if I remember correctly. And, you know, I think we were born about, you know, I'm a 1960 guy. I think maybe you're a few years later. But, you know, I remember watching that. That's an impact on me as a kid. Yeah. It just seems so surreal and so beautiful. And there you were at that very site, and you got all the inside dope on that.
Yeah. And, you know, it's funny. You always have people on YouTube that will poop all over your production, right? I mean, that's just typical. Like, one guy said at my idolation, is that the word?
Adulation?
Idolizing Michael Landon, which I don't idolize him, but I just, you know, I grew up with him. So he was kind of like this big, huge star. And that was very off-putting. I was like, well, you know, consider where I was as a kid, growing up with this guy who was a TV icon, and actually getting to meet him. It was a highlight of my life. Now, was he the ideal guy in person? No, he kind of was off-putting a little bit arrogant, a little condescending. He knew who he was.
I remember him strutting around a set that I was once on, and he again, you said it perfectly. He knew who he was. And the problem with, you know, he couldn't keep up the squeaky clean image because he chain smoked cigarettes. He was known to take a drink or two. I'm being kind. And he had some trouble on that Little House set, if I remember correctly, with one of his stars. What's her? Grassley, I think, or Karen Grassley.
Karen Grassley, yeah.
And it wasn't all roses on that set, was it?
No. In fact, I've made contact with her. I hope to interview her because she just came out with a book, and she kind of showed the warts of Michael Landon. He spoke crudely. In fact, when I was there watching the film Highway to Heaven, it was 1984. His daughter was there, and he knew that we were listening in, and he pulled her aside within earshot of us and said, he told this story, and I probably have to bleep it, but I'll bleep it myself. But he was reciting, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, all the king's horses and all the king's men, S.H., you know what?
Yes. I remember you telling that story on your video.
Wow. He said that right in front of us. I guess he didn't care.
I know. And, this is the first one that I happened to see. That's why I bring it up, because this is my initial, the first time I stumbled upon you. And that's how you stumble upon all these great providers on YouTube. You just kind of randomly, one thing leads to another, and then once you're transfixed on something, you can't tear yourself away. Jeff Benziger is my guest this evening. History Hunters. After this program, don't do it now, but run to your YouTube channel, and not your YouTube channel, Jeff's YouTube channel, and check this out. I guarantee you'll be hooked. All right, now, as far as historical figures, I remember the Teddy Roosevelt video that you did that was very, very riveting. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Next I'll ask you your favorites, but these are two of mine.
Okay. Yeah, well, that Theodore Roosevelt was this huge environmentalist president. He was an outdoorsman. He grew up and he spent some time in Montana hunting. He was a man's man. I mean, he was definitely unlike a lot of politicians back in those days. But he did a trip all the way out west on the train, and he came all the way to California. He made stops at Grand Canyon. He stopped in Wyoming. And they went to Yosemite National Park, and he was shown around the park by John Muir, who's probably the biggest name associated with Yosemite National Park. He helped to get it preserved the way it is today. And they actually wanted to get away from the reporters, so they broke loose from the reporters. They went out on this trail. They went all the way up Glacier Point. It's like a 4,000-foot climb by horse trail. They lost everybody, and that's the way he wanted it. I believe he slept on 40 army blankets at that time. And he woke up, there was snow on top of him, and he had several poses up there with John Muir. And I found the specific rock. I never knew that I could find it, but I took the photograph, and I actually found the rock that he sat on, and I superimposed us together on that one. People like to see that. They like to see the before and after, And so I'm always energized when I can find an old picture and go, oh, I know exactly where that is. And I'll put myself exactly where the photographer was at the time they took that picture. And then I'll fade it in and then fade it out. People love it.
Yeah, that aspect of your program is fantastic. When you put yourself right on that site, right in the same position that these people were in, I love that. I really do. There's one more. I have to throw it at you. There's one more. I'll ask for your most memorable or something that struck you on one of your excursions. But the Donner Party, and that horrendous incident that happened. I think it was 1850 something. Am I right on that? And can you tell us about that discovery? What discoveries you made that day?
I didn't make any discoveries that people probably couldn't find about on the internet, but there was a group of travelers came over from Springfield, Illinois. So families would often travel together, and then they get to Utah, and they hear of this guy that has a new route to California. It's Mr. Hastings. It's called the Hastings Cutoff. Well, they decided to take it. They said, okay, it's going to shave off some time. Well, what they didn't know was that the trail was really bad. I mean, there was no trail. They had to create trails. They had to cut trees down. They had to fill in canyons. It delayed them a month, and it placed them in the Sierra Nevada right before one of the biggest snowstorms in California history. They were stuck at the end of Donner Lake, and half the party, it was about 43 of them perished. It was just horrific. It was one of the most horrific things you could imagine. We had people dying. People were eating the dead bodies just to stay alive. A lot of people were repulsed by that. But you think, what would you do if that were you? If you're going to face starvation or you're going to eat, somebody else. And so there is a location where they actually, the first night they set up this lean-to against a tree. It is actually in a place called the Donner Picnic Area of the Stanislaus National Forest. And I've had so many comments from people saying, did they ever stop and think about the irony and the distastefulness of calling a picnic area named after the Donner Party? So, yeah, I've taken a lot of ribbing for that one.
Well, hey, you got to do what you have to do. Now, either you die or you take part.
Yeah.
There was a film called, I think my friend Ethan Hawke played in it, Alive, and that was done in the late 80s or something, where it was a crash into the Alps or I forget now.
Andes, yeah.
But a similar situation occurred, and those guys lived to tell the tale. They came back about 1972, and they had some survivors, and that's the reason why they resorted to what they had to do.
The Donner Party definitely has captured the imagination of people even to this day. There's something morbid about it, and it's kind of like when you see an accident on the freeway, everybody slows down to look at it, right? We just have this morbid curiosity, I think, just built into us.
Yeah, we're drawn to these morbid things, no doubt about it. Have you ever reached a site where it was shocking what you discovered, or you arrived and for one reason, but then you kind of were drawn to something else in a site that we've heard about or we've read about in our history book?
Well, you probably haven't read it in history books, but there's a city out here, Stockton, California, and it's very historic. It's one of the places that people came to in the 1850s because they would sail up into the Delta, and then they'd get off at Stockton and go up and mine for gold. So there's this old cemetery there, but there's plenty of people to talk about in that one. But in the 1940s, there was a gentleman who lost his wife, and he buried her there in the cemetery. He just couldn't cope with her loss. So he took his dad's plane and flew it directly into her grave after terrorizing the city of Stockton. He just buzzed he buzzed tall buildings, he buzzed houses. He was just on this crazy rampage. And a lot of people were just fascinated because they hadn't heard that one. And then the Stainer tragedy out here in California, where we had a little boy that was abducted. Kerry Stainer was the brother, but Stephen Stainer was abducted, and 7 years later, they found him, which doesn't happen ever. He was reunited with his family. And then his brother, Kerry, goes on this murderous rampage in Yosemite. Of course, he's behind bars. I think he's in San Quentin. He's about our age, actually. I found out one of the locations is just outside of Yosemite National Park. And I did a video where I rolled by the house, and the people were outside. The current residents of the house where the Stainers lived, they were outside, and they let me in. So I got to go inside the Stainer house. Nobody's ever been able to highlight that on video. Even TV cameras haven't been inside. So I felt privileged to be part of that.
Were you ever told to keep out? Did you run into some rough people that didn't want you around?
I haven't run into rough people, but this one old lady, she came out of this. I thought I was on this private road. I was actually doing the filming locations for a Peter Fonda movie in the 70s called Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry. And Peter Fonda, of course, is the son of actor Henry Fonda. And the opening scene has Peter Fonda at this boarding house, apartment. And I thought I was on this public road. And this lady comes out. She sees my camera in my hand. She goes, "What is this all about?" And I told her, I'm a YouTuber and I'm here to film the filming location for this movie. And she knew about it, of course, but she gave me so much grief about it. She thought I was trying to pull the wool over her eyes. I finally pulled out my business card and handed it to her, and all of a sudden she was real nice and sweet to me and let me go up to the building. But she said, "You have to promise me that you will not disclose the address of this place." And I didn't. I honored her request. But I'm expecting the day that somebody's going to run me out of a property. If you have time, I'll tell you how this whole thing started.
Yeah, please do. Go ahead.
Being somebody who was always looking at history books, I was fascinated with this character out west. His name was Black Bart.
Mm-hmm.
He was a legendary stagecoach robber, and he robbed approximately 10 stages over a 10-year span. He started out just above us, in the hills above us. And I wanted to know how this thing started. Well, he hid behind this rock up this old trail. He put up these fake guns, like he positioned these sticks up in the rocks above him, and he passed them off as his boys that were going to send out a volley of gunfire. Well, I thought, where's this rock? Somebody put a plaque on it a long time ago, but it wasn't public. It wasn't on public land. It was on private land. So I did a little detective work. I took the photograph that somebody had placed in one of the historical books. And then I did some Google Earth investigation. It's amazing what you can see on Google Earth. But I followed the old road, which is half of it's underwater now because they dammed one of the lakes here. And I had a hunch where it was. So I don't know, maybe it's okay to say it, we trespassed on this countryside. It was a fence we had to jump over and made our way to that place. And then lo and behold, there it is. There's the rock. There's the same boulder. Black Bart robbed 2 stagecoaches in that same place 10 years apart. And he was wounded when they shot at him, and he dropped a handkerchief. The handkerchief had a marking that linked him to a business in San Francisco, and that's how they arrested him. The local museum there in San Andreas, we had just been out to the site. I just went up to the docent, and I just coyly said, hey, can you go to this robbery site? And he said, no, I've never been to it. I said, well, look at the dirt on my shoes, because I've just been there. And he was kind of fascinated with that. And at that moment, I said, you know what? I need to take a video camera in there, and I need to start a YouTube channel doing these kinds of visits. And that's how this whole thing started. That was in, I believe it was in March of 2016. What?
Well, I said Black Bart kicked it off for you.
He did. So he did some good things.
Well, now, and I noticed that, there's throwback pictures or videos sometimes of you. I saw one as your mother was standing near me, but you were much too small to know where you were at that point, or remember anyway. But did this curiosity start as a child? Were you always just naturally curious?
I must have been, because I can remember the night that Robert Kennedy was assassinated, and I saw it on TV, and I was just fascinated by what's going on here. Why did they kill this man? And every time the president left office, I was glued to the set, like, what is this? What is this presidency, and why is it such a big deal that everybody wants to see it on TV? And I don't know, I just think that kind of started, but I was very young. I've always been curious. My day job, I'm a newspaper reporter. Actually, I'm an editor of a newspaper. And so I'm constantly looking for information, constantly processing things. And I think my skills are finding information and writing. And I got to tell you, research, writing, and video production are all key ingredients of being a successful YouTuber. I knew absolutely nothing about video production. So I started watching video production on YouTube itself, because you can learn anything on YouTube. So that's how I learned my skills, and it's not hard. And once you get into it, it's really rather simple. It's just very time-consuming. That's what it is. I could spend hours and hours. In fact, I worry about my health because I'm sitting down so much. So I'm trying to stay fit at the same time. There's just not enough hours in the day.
Well, that's true. That's true. Yeah. On the Romeo program, Jeff Benziger, and we're good. I want to keep you on for another 10 if you have time. Do you have time?
Sure.
Okay, the preparation. Now, you just touched on it a bit. Once you go to the site, wherever this may be, do you scope it out on Google? Do you mark your tracks where you want to go, so on and so forth, or is it improvisational once you get there?
Well, I have found that the best preparation is to actually have a map in your hand and mark it where you know things are. I'll give you a good example. If you've ever watched a Western, I'm sure most people have, I'd say a ton of movies that you see on TV were shot in what's called the Alabama Hills in California. It's off of Highway 395. It's actually on the eastern side of the Sierra Nevada. This beautiful place. It's miles and miles of boulders, beautiful boulders, hills, where the bad men hide behind and shoot each other. That place is so chock full of filming locations that you literally cannot hit them all in a day. And the great thing about Alabama Hills is there's very distinctive rocks. For example, there's a rock there called the Gene Autry rock. You know it when you see it, because Gene Autry is posed by it with his horse Champion. And it's just a thrill to go stand in these places where legends like that stood. So, yeah, there's a lot of preparation, a lot of Google earthing that you have to do. And you don't, and then once you leave the place, you go, oh, I forgot about this place. I didn't visit this place. There's just not enough time unless you want to let this take over your life. And again, like I said, I have a day job. So another thing that I do is if we're going on vacation, I always try to find out, what's in the area. And so last summer we went to Mount Rushmore. Wanted to take my girlfriend Sarah, and we visited Mount Rushmore. We visited the Black Hills. We visited this very famous Wall Drug Store up there. And then I also found out that the little boy from the TV show Hazel, Bobby Buntrick, is buried there in Keystone. But Keystone is the closest town to Mount Rushmore. So I went in there and I visited his grave and did a show on that. And that was just wildly popular. It seems like whenever you do videos on young Hollywood stars who died at a young age, people have been fascinated by it. And I don't know why.
I saw that video, Bobby Buntrick, Hazel, Shirley Booth fame, Don DeFore. I remember the show like it was yesterday. I know many of my listeners remember that show. And, you would think of an obscure name like Bobby Buntrick wouldn't mean anything to most people, but you'd be surprised how many people are so in tune with these things, I mean, instead of a big celebrity, you had a child star that died tragically, if I remember correctly, and
he drove off a bridge, and he drowned basically in the river. Recently went to Pahrump, Nevada, which is a growing community outside of Las Vegas, and that's where this radio legend by the name of Art Bell, who was Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell, and a lot of your viewers may recognize the name, but he's buried there. And in 1 month's time, I've had so much interest in that particular video. I have almost 150,000 views on it. And somebody else that's very popular on YouTube had done a video on that particular individual as well. And I've surpassed his video that was posted 3 years ago. So in 1 month, my video has overtaken his. Again, there's just no rhyme or reason. Some videos you think are going to be really popular that don't get the views, and then vice versa. We just walked in the museum up there in Keystone and did a video on Carrie Ingalls, who is the sister of Laura Ingalls Wilder. Carrie Ingalls lived in Keystone, South Dakota, and they've got a little collection of her memorabilia there. I posted that one. That's wildly popular as well. And then, of course, we visited Deadwood in South Dakota, where Wild Bill Hickok is buried with Calamity Jane. I just think there's certain people that people are always interested in, and Wild Bill Hickok is one of them. I think they're more interested in him than they are Buffalo Bill, which I've done several things on him as well. I went to the house where he died in Denver, Colorado, and I don't think anybody else had, put that on YouTube. They probably will now that they're hearing about it.
So I just saw that one on Hickok just about 20 minutes before the program began, and that was an interesting one. See what I'm doing, Jeff. I'm up at 4:00 in the morning over here on the East Coast, watching a few of your videos, watching you and Sarah going about your business there. And I was wondering now with Sarah, how often does she come with you, or do you go on your excursions by yourself for the most part?
Well, if they're within driving distance of where we live, I often will go without her because she also has a day job. She works for a school district, and she can't get away as much as I do. But we have gone to Southern California together. There's just times she doesn't want to be on camera. I got to be honest, she's not wild about being on camera at all. But I kind of roped her into it. I could tell,
and she seems very reluctant sometimes. Sometimes she has that look on her face, like "wait till I get you home" kind of look.
Yeah. For example, we took our little Subaru to this old mining town called Aurora, Nevada, which is close to Bodie, California, and we put her through hell. That car went through hell. There was no trail, and we finally get there, and there's hardly a brick standing. And she says, "After all of this, I get this and this." She was actually not mad, but people thought she was really upset at me for dragging her out to this place where nothing exists anymore. But there was definitely this huge thriving town at the time. In fact, Mark Twain, when he came out to Nevada, his brother was the territorial, I think he was the governor or Secretary of State or something. Orion Clemens comes out. Mark Twain follows him. He starts dabbling with writing in Aurora. And I pinpointed the actual spot where the cabin was, where he'd go in there and he'd write. Again, nothing there anymore. But we took the pictures and we held them up and we said, okay, this lines up with what we're seeing here. And it just fascinated me that, oh my gosh, so much history is steeped here, and absolutely nothing tells you that there was a town here. Maybe a wall or two, and maybe a stamp mill that they put in place just as a demonstration. But it's fascinating. And then over the hill a little bit, there's a cemetery where this gunslinger by the name of William Carter, Carder, his tombstone says that his widow put on here that he was assassinated. He was this vile human being. He walks out of a saloon one day, and one of his enemies just unloaded on him and just murdered him in the streets of Aurora. He's buried there. His tombstone's in the dust. It's broken, but when we found it, we were just elated. It's like, oh my gosh. I mean, you got the Old West, you got a gunslinger murdered, assassinated on the grave marker, and it was so very hard to find. In fact, we almost gave up on it, but we found it.
I have one more for you, and this one's a big one because I face this being on the radio and having many, many listeners who disagree with my dissertation. If I go into politics, whatever the case may be, what do you do with your detractors, which are few? You know, most people are very much supportive. They're on your side. And I'm one of them, but what do you do when you have a detractor? Do you highlight that detractor? Do you answer his or her question, or do you just ignore them?
Well, for the most part, at this point, I just let it go. Sometimes I'll answer because what they say is so ridiculous. I just feel like I have to answer it. But they'll make a comment about, my hair. They'll just say really vile things. I have acne scars, so somebody mentioned that, they'll say things about Sarah that are really off limits, and I'll delete some of those. During the pandemic, when I couldn't get out, I said, I'm going to make a video about, I collected up all the nasty things people would say. I saved them, did screenshots, and I talked about them in I think it was like a 15-minute video. Talk about how supportive most people are, but also, here's the other side. And if you want to be a YouTuber, let's face it, you got to accept the really nasty and negative comments. It's no different than famous people. I mean, can you imagine, for example, Donald Trump's going through? My gosh.
Yeah. It's hard to just ostracize half the country. And just keep going. Every
movie star's got its detractors. I think of Alec Baldwin, you name it. Any celebrity's going to have people who absolutely hate their guts. And,
well, I didn't tell you the truth. Here's one more because I need to know. What is your next excursion? What's the next plan?
There was a football coach, a well-known football coach by the name of Amos Alonzo Stagg. He was at the University of Chicago. A lot of the football methods, plays, terminologies, devices were created by Mr. Stagg. He's buried in the next county, and I'm going to highlight him on Sunday. His ashes are in this mausoleum that had one of the last surviving Pony Express riders. So that was like a bonus, and that'll be coming up. And then I have a huge list. I just don't have the time that I need to get to all these places. There are YouTubers that do this full time. This is what they do for a living because YouTube is really paying off for them, so they don't have to worry about a day job. I'm not there yet. I hope to get there someday, but that would really free me up to go and do a lot of traveling and enabling me to get to all these places. That's the other frustrating thing is people will always leave comments, hey, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? It's like, well, I'd love to, but there's a reality. I have a mortgage and I have bills to pay. So I have to hang on to what I have for the day job and try to fit in all this other stuff and extracurricular stuff into my free time and vacation time. And that probably is the most frustrating thing about this whole endeavor.
Well, here's one request before I say goodbye. And this is Jeff Benziger, and this is History Hunters, where you must go. Don't give me any excuses because it's a click or two away. And my friend here has over 100 subscribers, and for good reason.
100,000.
Yes?
You said 100 subscribers.
100,000. Did I say 100? Yeah. My mistake. That's more like my YouTube. That's more like my YouTube channel. 100, but 100,000. Yes, and I amend that. 100,000. I think it's 107,000. I think I saw
104.
And here's my request. One of my favorite films, One-Eyed Jack, Marlon Brando and the great Carl Malden, both gone. Not forgotten. I think in Monterey they shot that. What was you saying?
Really?
Maybe in the near future you head up that direction and we have one from there.
Well, I had not heard about that. I'll look into it.
Yeah, Brando was my guy. That was, if I ever had one, he was it. Not his private life, but his on-screen masterful performances, one after the other. They were unbelievable. All right, Jeff, I really appreciate it. Part 2, maybe in the near future. I hope so.
I really appreciate the opportunity to spread the message to New York.